Why New York? How come you chose New York? Is that where you were? Is that where you're from? Is that where you love? Or did you see it as a particularly attractive place to invest in real estate?
It's a good question. It comes up a bit. So I grew up here. I grew up in New York. Um, and my first project in 2001 was with my dad as a local project that took way longer than it should have, more so because I didn't know what I was doing. Um, and you learn and you start to, from there, we started doing projects in different neighborhoods in, Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, which we were familiar with. And as we expanded and as we started to do more projects, we realized that our specialty is in part architecture and local knowledge. You know, uh, New York City in general has a pretty particular set of zoning codes and building regulations. And being familiar with them and being able to analyze and look at sites pretty quickly just from having the architectural or the technical background was a benefit. So we felt that was one way we can create value where some other companies couldn't. And then with that, we just developed a local knowledge where we had the teams in place, whether it was from the sales, brokerage, construction, where we knew all the parties that we needed to complete a development or acquire an asset. So it just became this thing of local knowledge where we knew what we were doing in different spots. Like if we picked a neighborhood, we can tell you pretty much everything about it, what the comps are, the history of the market. So it was a local knowledge that, we kind of developed. We explored looking at other cities, over the last 4 or 5 years, especially during COVID, when everyone was kind of running from New York as quickly as possible and kind of shifting more down south. And we looked at some of those deals and they were attractive, but the concern was that I was looking at deals in Miami that I was familiar with Miami to a certain extent, but I'm going to Google Earth and I'm looking at a site and the neighborhood and I'm relying on other people for comps and stuff like that, where my strength was local. So I was like, okay, instead of, in some respect, almost guessing on and taking a leap of faith on certain types of cities outside of New York, I was like, let's stick where we are, where we know. Our staff, our team is kind of scattered throughout New York, so everyone kind of has their own neighborhood specialty, and we're kind of growing our business slowly. So the goal is, okay, be strategic and build out the business in New York in kind of our own backyard.
What do you see as the advantages of New York?
It has its pros and its cons. It's a market that when things are going well, the national market, is a little bit different than New York, but at the same time, they kind of mirror each other. New York is stable, as far as, as long as you're avoiding the outskirts or areas that are not really gentrified yet. I think it's a pretty stable market. There's well-established comps, and you've got population growth that is, slow and steady through the years. It has its ups and downs, but overall, it's a growing city. You have technical or tech hubs that have kind of been appearing, in different parts of the city. It's evolving. There's certain areas, certain neighborhoods that get upzoned over time, and those areas kind of explode, and there's always kind of little things happening in the city. It has its political and regulatory issues that you have to kind of navigate, but that's just the price of doing business here. It's been great. It's been a lot of fun to do it here. It's nice to see projects that we've completed 20 years ago and how the neighborhoods have kind of evolved around them, and then our new projects, how they evolve into existing neighborhoods.
So tell me a little bit about the challenges. You mentioned regulatory challenges. You mentioned political challenges.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of those and that people ought to be aware of before investing in New York.
It's always involved. It's always evolving. New York. Regulations are always kind of changing. You have to stay on top of the market, what's going on, what's being rezoned, what's being downzoned, how rent control is affecting certain projects. I think if you're familiar with it and you understand it, it's a lot easier to navigate. So for us, we can look at something pretty clearly and understand the path to do so. I think that's where part of the architecture and the technical background really comes in handy, where we can look at a deal where 10 other developers might have passed on it, but we might have an understanding of something that maybe they didn't because they hadn't given it to their architectural consultant yet or the zoning specialist, and we can look at that and kind of take it from there. Every market has its challenges. In New York, especially during COVID, had a big decline, and then it came roaring back. The growth in New York was almost 18 to 24 months behind the rest of the nation in a way. So it was a bit of an anomaly in that way, but it's usually a pretty stable market.
The hosts of the YQA Investor Podcast are not licensed accountants, attorneys, or financial advisors. This podcast is free entertainment and information only. It should not be considered professional or personalized financial advice. You should consult the appropriate professional for specific advice relating to your situation.